Hi, everybody. The next section we're going to look at is section S.25, which is slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. The general topic of this is called analytic geometry. It's where geometry and algebra kind of combine, or where they intersect. It is extraordinarily important to understand analytic geometry because it is the basis of all graphics. So those of you who are interested in graphics arts, graphics design, gaming design, any kind of programming that requires some type of interface, whether it's in architecture or it's in design or it's in a world like a game, you have to understand fundamentally analytic geometry. This is a huge topic, but this is the very beginning of it, and it's so important. So I hope you guys will enjoy it. This is slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. I have not previewed it, so I'm going to see how they're going to explain it and how we're going to do it. So slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay. Line W is parallel. Okay, so this is going to tell us something. Let's see, I got to go back one. There we go. Okay, let me get my, there we are. Slope of line V is -7/9. If you want to visualize that, it's at an angle like this. Not quite 45 degrees down, but pretty close. It goes down 7/9. W is parallel to line V. And the way we mark parallel in geometry is like this. We draw two lines. So I'm going to label this line V and this line W. And when we say they're parallel, we mark them like this. That would be the geometric markings. Now it says, what is the slope of line W? Well, clearly, if they are parallel, it has the exact same slope, doesn't it? And we can see that. So it's going to be -7/9. Not that exciting, but what I don't want you to do is just memorize the rules for no good reason. You want to think about what's actually happening. So we're looking at -7/9, of course. And that's it. Now they're perpendicular. Now we have line M, and line M has a slope of -6/5. So this one is a little bit steeper than a 45-degree angle. It looks something like this, maybe. I think I didn't quite get it exactly right, but it's close enough. So this is line M, and it has a slope of, this is supposed to be -6/5. And what we're interested in is a line N that is perpendicular to line M. Well, those of you who know any math or any geometry at all know that perpendicular lines meet at 90-degree angles. And this is line N. Now, the rule is pretty easy to remember. Notice that M is a little bit steeper than 45 degrees and N is a little less steep than 45 degrees. We say that this is an inverse relationship. And in fact, the slopes are inverses of one another. So the way we write them is that M has a slope of -6/5. That's the slope of line M. I should have written slope because of the M, but oh well. Now line N, if you just memorize the rule, line N has a slope, M, equal to the negative reciprocal. Now the reciprocal is because as M gets steeper and steeper and steeper, hopefully you can see that N is going to get less and less steep. That's called an inverse relationship. And the way we write it is 5/6. That's the inverse. And it just so happens that if one of them is negative, the other one has to be positive. There's only one exception to that, and that is on the axes, because the axes are the weird exception. They undefined slope and so on. But anyway, this is it, 5/6, and it's just a negative reciprocal. I don't want you to memorize the rule. I want you to think about why this is happening. So anyway, here it is, 5/6. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. And probably for the rest, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Okay, so Q has a slope and line R is -5/3. Are they parallel or perpendicular or neither? Now, if they have equal slopes, then they're parallel. These are not equal. If they are negative reciprocals, then they're perpendicular. This is not -3/5, so it is neither. Six over 5 and 6/5, they're parallel. If they have equal slopes, of course they're parallel. 7/8, and it says line R is perpendicular. What is the slope of line R? So Q, and the way I'm going to write it is M of line Q, that's what I'm doing here, equals 7/8. So the slope of line R, if it's perpendicular to Q, is going to be the reciprocal, 8/7, or it's called an inverse or a reciprocal, but it's also the opposite sign. So it has to be -8/7. And I'm going to type it in. Okay, so now we have to recognize where the slopes are located, which is called the coefficient on the x variable. And line G, the slope of line G, that's the way I'm going to write it, is equal to 8/5. And the slope of line H is -5/8. Of course, these are perpendicular because they are negative reciprocals. And we want to say which one they are, and they are perpendicular. Now 8/7, and we want D, line D is the way we write this is we say line D is parallel to line C. And that also means that the slope of line D is equal to the slope of line C. I'm just giving you a little bit of notation to work with. And we want the slope of line D, since the slope of line C is 8/7. Of course, the slope of line D is 8/7. Okay, line C, the slope of line C is equal to -9/8. And D is perpendicular to C. So we say line D is perpendicular to line C. That is the symbol for perpendicular. For those of you who are thinking about geometry, thinking ahead a little bit, that is the symbol for perpendicular, which has perpendicular line segments in it. What is the slope of line D? So we want the slope of line D, since they're perpendicular, they are negative reciprocals of one another. That makes it positive 8/9. They have to have opposite signs, and they have to have opposites for multiplication, which is 8/9. One way that you can think of it is that if you multiply the slope of line C times the slope of line D, and if they're perpendicular, you get -1 when you multiply them together. And if you multiply those slopes together, you're going to see you always get -1. Anyway, we're interested in the slope of line D, which is 8/9. Looks like I'm getting some lag. Hopefully it won't be a problem. Okay, so these are negative slopes, but they're not negative reciprocals of one another, and they're not equal. So it's going to be neither. They're just trying to trick you. If this slope had been 5/4, then they would be perpendicular. Or if it was -4/5, then they would be parallel, but it is neither. Okay, the slope of line J is equal to, sorry, it's funky looking J, -8/5. And K is perpendicular to J. I just want you to practice your notation a little bit. What is the slope of line K? So the slope of line K has to be the negative reciprocal, which is 5/8. A lot of people don't understand what I said. When I say negative reciprocal, I mean you have to change the sign, because the opposite of -8/5 is 5/8, the opposite reciprocal rather. So it's 5/8. Oh, now we get to solve for the slope. Again, I'm going to some of you hopefully have watched some of my other videos and understand that I'm not going to do this every single time. I'm going to do this one time for you. 1 minus 10 and 2 minus 4. It is important that you subtract them in the same order. It's also important that you take the difference of the y's over the difference in the x's. Now, I don't do any of this. I actually do the whole thing in my head. And so this is the slope of line U, and it is going to be -9 over -2, which is +9 over +2. It can't be reduced, and we prefer not, definitely don't make it a mixed number. That would be a terrible idea. 9 over 2 is fine. And we want the slope of line V, and it's saying that V is perpendicular to line U. So we want the negative reciprocal for the slope of V, which is going to be -2 over 9. Okay, this time we want the slope of line M. Unfortunately, it's the M of M. I'm going to take the 2 minus 7, which is -5. I'm going to take the 8 minus 5, which is 3, and I'm done. The n is parallel, so the slope of n is equal. That's going to be -5 over 3. That's it. Remember, parallel lines have equal slopes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and write my arrows. It's a really good habit to get into to write your arrows, because what'll happen if you don't write the arrows is you'll do 11 minus 7 to get your slope. So this is the slope of B. I should have written the M a little bigger. Let me write the M a little bigger. There we go. The slope of B is going to be 11 minus 7, which is 4. And then what'll happen if you don't write the arrows, I guarantee this is going to happen to you over and over again. You're going to do the 6 minus 3. It's just human nature. If you go this direction and your 6 is sitting there in front of you and you see the 3 over there, you're just going to want to subtract them. It is a good idea to force yourself to do this until you get really adept at it. That's going to be -3. So the slope of line B is -4 over 3. Now, sometimes they're going to write the negative in front. Sometimes they're going to write it on top. Sometimes they're going to write it in the bottom. I recommend this one right there. It's much better than the one in front. Okay. Now we're going to do the slope of line C. I'll put it up here. And I'm going to take 2 minus 5. Notice I would usually do the arrow in the other direction. And in fact, you know what? I am going to do it in the other direction. It doesn't matter which way you go. You just have to make sure the arrows are going in the same way. And the reason I'm going to do 5 minus 2 is because it's going to be a positive, isn't it? And then 10 minus 6 is going to be also a positive, which is going to be 4. So it's going to be 3 over 4. Now, suppose I did decide to go the other way. I just want to show you. What if I did it this way? 2 minus 5 is -3, and 6 minus 10 is -4. And notice that they are equal to one another. So this is a much better answer, isn't it? Now, are these negative reciprocals? If you multiply them together, do you get -1? And yes, you do. So that means that C is perpendicular to line B. Sorry, I didn't quite finish that. Got it? Perpendicular. Okay, we've got line G, so we want the slope of line G, and it's going to be, shall we go this way? Do you see why I chose that? I hope you see it. That's going to be 4 over 5, isn't it? See, practice will really help you here. And we want H is perpendicular to G, so H is perpendicular to line G. That's how we write that in geometry. And then we know that the slope of H has to be the opposite reciprocal, which is -5 over 4. Notice I use negative reciprocal, opposite reciprocal interchangeably. And if you multiply those two slopes together, you get -1. So here it is, -5 over 4. Oh, they're going to give us some big numbers this time. I hope you see why I'm going to go in this direction. Can everybody see why? -89 minus negative 90. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write it. This is the slope of line G, and I'm going to write it for you. Negative 89 minus negative 90. That becomes a plus 90, isn't it? And then I've got negative 53, I'm subtracting the x's, minus negative 54. And what I get is 1 over 1. If I had subtracted the other way, I would have gotten negative 1 over negative 1. But 1 over 1 is just 1. And I recommend keeping it like this for now, because again, we're interested in the negative reciprocal maybe. Well, we're going to compare them. So this time I want the slope of line H. I'm going to write it. And I am going to subtract it in the same order so that I get a positive 1. See that? That's going to be positive 1 for the y's. And 27 minus 28 is negative 1. And are these negative reciprocals? They sure are, aren't they? The way we usually write this one is negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. One thing I want you to notice is that if you multiply the slopes together, you definitely get negative 1. If you were to draw these, one of them would look like this. This would be a slope of 1 because it goes up 1 and over 1, and they're equal. This is a 45-degree angle. This is called an isosceles right triangle. Lots of stuff going on there. But if I want the other one, which is, sorry, it's a little funky looking there, but notice it's a negative 1. It's supposed to be a negative 1. Anyway, they are definitely perpendicular. Okay, we've got 67 over 96 is the slope of line F. Easy to make a mistake with the numbers like that. And they're perpendicular. So we say G is perpendicular to F. So we want the slope of line G, which is going to be the negative reciprocal, negative 96 over 67. Looks good. Okay, slope of line S. Do you see how notation can sometimes make your life easier? This is the slope of line S is negative 97 over 73. And S, I wrote it backwards, but it doesn't matter, is parallel to T. So we want the slope of T, which is going to be equal, negative 97 over 73. Not very interesting. Obviously, you could have done this very quickly. I just want to make sure you think about it a little bit. Let me just double check my numbers. Looks good. Parallel. Yep. And A, the slope of line A is equal to negative 9. But remember that that's the same as negative 9 over 1, isn't it? And B is perpendicular to line A, which means the product of their slopes is negative 1. Another way to say that is they are negative reciprocals, which makes the slope of line B 1/9. All right, these are equal slopes, which immediately should inform you that you're looking at parallel lines. That's a really important idea. And M and N are parallel, of course, because they have equal slopes. It looks like we're getting there. All right, we want the slope of line D. Ooh, I don't want to accidentally submit. All right, I am going to go in this direction. The reason is so that I'll get a positive 42. Negative 25 plus 42. Some of you are going to need to do this on the side. If you can do it in your head, it looks like 17 to me. It's a good idea to check it. Now, some of you are going to grab your calculator every time, which is a bad idea. I would recommend that you do the negative 25 minus negative 42, and this is a plus. So I've got negative 25 plus 42. Now the 42 is going to be a bigger number. Absolute value is larger. So this is the same as 42 minus 25. And if I subtract those, Notice I get a 7 and a 1, and it's 17. The positives win. Now, all of that I could have avoided by just simply subtracting in my head. Now, remember, you have to do this in order. The arrows have to go in the same direction. This time, I'm taking negative 38 plus 7, which is negative 31. And I'm done. Now, I like the negative in the numerator. That's up here. Most books stick it out in front, which is the same thing. This is probably my last choice. I really don't like this. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I don't like it. One of the reasons I don't like it is that it's kind of ambiguous. If you don't know what ambiguous means, look it up. It's hard to tell whether it's in the top or the bottom, and it could be either one. So this is a really bad idea. Most books do it this way because it's easier to put it in the typesetter. Anyway, I recommend this one. E is parallel to D, so we want the same slope, negative 17 over 31. I don't think they would count it wrong if you put it in the denominator, but I think it's just better to always have it in the numerator. Oh man, I'm getting lag. Okay, the slope of V, line V, is equal to negative 93 over 88. And we say that W is perpendicular to V, so they're going to be negative reciprocals. That means that the slope of W is going to be 88 over 93. And I'm double checking my numbers again. Looks good. If you multiply the two slopes, you get negative 1. All right, we've got a 21 over 47 for line P. And the equation for line Q is right there. So that's going to be the slope of line Q. It's going to be negative 47 over 21. And it definitely looks like if you multiplied those, you got negative 1. They are negative reciprocals. That makes them perpendicular, doesn't it? All right, we've got line D. So we're looking at the slope of line D. And I'm going to go in this direction. That's going to be negative 25 plus 45, which is positive 20. And 4 minus 11 is negative 7. So I'm going to put it in the numerator. Okay. And E is parallel. So we want a parallel slope. It's negative 20 over 7. Be careful. If you can reduce your fraction, you need to do it, because they always tell you it says to write it as, well, usually they say to write it as simplify. So it says simplify. There it is. Simplify. So submit. Gonna have me do quite a few of them. Okay, so the slope of line G. I'm gonna go in this direction for a good reason. I guess it doesn't matter. I'm gonna go in that direction anyway. 12 minus negative 10 is 22. And 26 minus 84. Well, some of you are gonna need to do this on the side. Now, I'm going to get 30, looks like 38 maybe. But if you can't see that it's negative 38 in your head, you need to do it on the side. So I'm going to borrow from the 8, make it a 7. I'm going to get a 14. 6 from 14 is 8. 2 from 7 is 5. 58. Oops. I was thinking 38. And be careful. It is a negative 84, so it's going to be the negative 58, isn't it? Now there's two problems. The negative's in the numerator, in the denominator, and it can be reduced by dividing by 2. So I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 2. I'm going to move my negative to the numerator. I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to get, looks like 29, huh? Now I need to do the slope of line H. So I'm going to go in this direction. That's going to be negative 28 plus 6, which is negative 22. And I'm going to go in this direction, which is going to give me negative 58. And that is going to be positive Let's make sure I'm doing it right. Yep, that's going to be positive 11 over 29. Man, they are really trying to trick you, aren't they? Notice they are negatives, but they're not negative reciprocals. If you multiply these together, you do not get -1. They are neither. They are intersecting, by the way. Anytime you have different slopes, they intersect. But one's negative, one's positive, but they're not negative reciprocals, which would make them perpendicular. This is neither. Be careful. Easy mistake to make. All right, m is 11 over 69, and they're parallel, so they're going to have equal slopes, 11 over 69. Done. Perpendicular means I have to have a negative reciprocal with this one, negative 87 over 43. I'm going a little faster just to help you out. And we're almost done. They are not negative reciprocals. This is neither. 26 over 67 and negative 26 over 67 are intersecting, but they are not parallel and they're not perpendicular. They are neither. And we have a final one, and I hope you guys will practice the slope of line J. I hope you noticed that it really helps to be able to subtract in your head. That's going to be a positive 2. And then I'm going to take the negative 16 plus 15, which is -1, which is -2 over 1. And they're parallel. So we want the slope of line K, which is -2, isn't it? And then we're done. So parallel slopes are equal. This is going to be a -2. And I hope you guys will do yours and see you back again. Bye.